One wrong move, and Donnie Brasco would find himself shoes full of cement, laying motionless at the bottom of the Hudson. As an undercover agent, Joe Pistone successfully did the impossible, infiltrating the most dangerous mafia families in America. But for decades, his name was wiped off the face of the earth. Joe didn't exist. He was Donnie Brasco now. Donnie squeezed himself into the diabolical American-Italian mob. He formed relationships, created an intricate backstory, followed orders to take out innocent people, and sold himself as a jewelry thief, all while lying through his teeth. Somehow, despite chaos and bloodshed unfolding around him, he managed to take down over 100 mafia members. Enraged by betrayal, the mob put out a $500,000 bounty for his head on a stick. Did Joe Pistone make it out alive? Let's find out. Before Joe became Donnie, a sneaky, fake, risk-taking undercover agent willing to put himself on the line for the sake of the justice system, he was just plain old Joe Pistone, a Pennsylvania-born man who grew up in Paterson, New Jersey. With a Sicilian heritage and therefore a thorough understanding of the Italian language, Joe had the framework of a mafia man. But he wasn't a mafia man. He was a teacher who'd worked for about a year at a school in Paterson before transitioning to the Office of Naval Intelligence. He also occasionally drove 18-wheeler trucks and bulldozers. Little did he know, these skills would soon catapult him into the riskiest job of his life. Now with experience at the Office of Naval Intelligence under his belt, the next logical step in an intelligence-focused career was onwards and upwards to the FBI, where the special agent yearly pay is approximately $74,635. As a 29-year-old, Joe burst the front door down at the Jacksonville, Florida office on July 7, 1969. And once he was in, there was no looking back. Because of Joe's experience driving large-scale vehicles, he was eventually assigned undercover work infiltrating a vehicle theft ring. It proved a masterstroke because his successful execution resulted in the arrest of over 30 criminals. At this moment, the FBI realized they'd found a diamond in the rough. Pistone had a gift for going undercover. In 1974, when Pistone was assigned this role, vehicle thievery was near an all-time high. Every year, the cost of hijacked trucks exceeded $4.2 million. While his work squashing a vehicle theft operation was applauded and respected, it's not what Joe's become renowned for. As impressive as he was to take down dozens of criminals while undercover, just 2 years later in 1976, he took his first steps in what would be one of the most significant undercover operations in American history. Joe was about to adopt a new identity and infiltrate the treacherous New York Mafia, a highly organized Italian-American criminal society that operated by its own rules, and who wasn't afraid to dispose of anyone who got in their way. Joe's goal was relatively simple. Over the course of 6 months, he was to identify the hierarchy of families within the Mafia, while also connecting the dots between the mob families in Florida and Milwaukee. Well, it sounds simple in theory. In reality, it took 6 months to merely make the first connection. The first of many in a journey that would in turn become a 6-year roller coaster of sleepless nights, dangerous fights, and endless lies. There was no question about it. Joe Pistone was the perfect man for the job. He was the only one with the capability to successfully take down the 5 main mafia families from the inside: Bonano, Gambino, Colombo, Genovese, and Lucchese. Why? Because Joe already spoke Italian, came from Sicilian ancestry, and had spent years growing up in a Jersey neighborhood which allowed him to familiarize himself with Italian-American culture. Joe put his hand up for the job knowing the serious risks. For the sake of protection, the FBI gave Pistone a new identity, with a fake driver's license as well as access to cash and credit cards. His new name? Donnie Brasco. His improvised backstory? A small but very successful jewel thief and burglar. After all, to gain trust within a criminal network, you need to be a criminal yourself. A driver's license and a loose, fictitious backstory wasn't going to cut it though. Pistone needed to be sure of his new identity, so he enrolled in a school to learn about precious gems and jewels. If the mob believed that Donnie was an expert in his field, there'd be less room for raised eyebrows. Countless anecdotes needed to be thought up and memorized as well. From fights he had in school, to past lovers, to his obsession for his grandmother's cassata siciliana, his story couldn't afford to have any holes. Joe, or should we say Donnie, also needed to study the mafia's members and understand the basics of its operations, all before being sent out into the field. Once the backstory was airtight, the FBI set him up with 2 apartments, one in New York and one down in South Florida. From there, it was all guns a-blazing. Donnie was going full steam ahead with the intention to take down the mob. The operation was given the codename Sun Apple, after the locations of its 2 simultaneous operations, Sun for sunny Miami and Apple for New York City, the Big Apple. With the operation now officially underway, Donnie circled through bars, restaurants, and cafes that he knew were frequented by certain mafia members. It took months for a solid opportunity for progress to reveal itself. That opportunity came in the form of Benjamin Ruggiero, nicknamed Lefty. This man had operated as a loyal foot soldier for the New York Mafia and its head families for the better part of 3 decades. Lefty boasted a long list of people he had, taken care of. 26 people to be exact. So Donnie needed to tread very carefully. One wrong move, and he could have become number 27. With his rock-solid backstory and perfected jewel thief persona, Donnie managed to successfully strike up a conversation with Lefty. This was the big break he needed. With a considerable amount of charisma, Donnie impressed Ruggiero and talked his way into a business partnership. Lefty was now Donnie's mentor. In the mob world, mentorship is not to be underestimated. Donnie was now a branch of Lefty, and if Donnie messed up, then Lefty would get the blame. And by get the blame, we mean that his shoes would have been filled with cement and he'd been tossed into the frigid waters of the Hudson River. If Brasco let the family down, Lefty would pay with his own life. So trust was everything. Donnie's involvement was small to begin with, placing bets on Lefty's behalf and helping him make collections for the bookmaking operation in his social club. But as time passed, Donnie's role grew, and he developed further mafia connections. Lefty officially made Donnie an associate of the Bonano family in early 1977, and he was welcomed into the typical mob pay structure. It went like this: any money that Donnie earned, be it clean or dirty, would be split 50-50 between Donnie and Lefty. Lefty would then split his share 50-50 with his captain, Mike Sabella. And then, at the top of the food chain, Mike Sabella split his share 50-50 with the Bonano family bosses. The money was dirty, and it came in droves. The FBI estimated that the mafia earned between $50 and $90 billion a year in 2002. While Ruggiero was the main contact, he wasn't the only mafia face that Donnie saw on the regular. Thanks to Lefty, Donnie had arranged ongoing dealings with Frank Balistieri of the Milwaukee crime family. The other key member across this operation was Bonano family mobster Anthony Mira. Donnie created a close relationship with Mira in the early days, before the mobster was sent to prison. Interestingly, Mira and Ruggiero lived in the same apartment building in Manhattan. If not for Mira, Joe wouldn't have been able to strike up a chat with Lefty in the first place. Can you imagine what it must have been like to have woken up every day and pretended to be somebody else? To be away from your family the whole time as well? That quickly became Joe Pistone's normal. Merely once every 3 or 4 months would he find the time to visit his wife Maggie and his 3 kids. Strict silence about his operations evidently took a tremendous toll on their relationship, with struggles aplenty along the way. Time and time again, Donnie was forced to lie in order to keep his real identity a secret. One time, he had his car trunk packed with Christmas gifts, ready to drive down to visit his actual family. But before he could leave, he bumped into a couple of guys from his crew, who invited him out. Donnie Brasco was a bachelor, so he had no choice but to ditch the plans with his real family and go party with his mafia buddies. Mafia members even brought a Christmas tree to Donnie's apartment and helped him decorate it, thinking that he was alone for the holidays. He was at the mercy of the mob, and there was nothing he could do about it. He just had to continue playing the part and keep trying to acquire information as the days rolled by. Donnie's typical day would start with a meeting with his mentor, Lefty, otherwise known in the mob world as his captain. Together, they'd meet and hang out in various bars and nightclubs, racking their brains trying to think of new criminal ways to make a few bucks, as well as deciphering means to climb up the mafia ladder. Donnie quickly learned his place. No matter the circumstances, he never asked the whereabouts, identities, or operations of the other members. Too many questions would bring suspicion, and enough suspicion could have led to his reveal as a rat. And we all know what happens to wise guys who turn out to be rats. Occasionally, totaling 4 separate events, Donnie Brasco was ordered to take out a target. Refusing would invite skepticism and draw unnecessary attention, so he accepted the orders without question. Then at a later date, he'd find a way to get himself out of the situation. In the event that he couldn't, the FBI would step in and stage a fake attack. Even when he had little or no helpful information to report back to the FBI, Joe needed cash. Begrudgingly, the authorities continued to provide him with the funds he needed even when he refused to wear a wire. The reality of the situation was that the early days were needed to establish trust. One glimpse of a bulge under his shirt and the whole operation would have imploded. On July 12, 1979, the head of the Bonano family, Carmine Galante, was fatally attacked in the courtyard of a Brooklyn restaurant. A war quickly broke out between the upcoming rival leaders within the family, who each wanted to take the throne for themselves. The result? Two distinct groups within the family who were not getting along. Tensions were at all-time highs, and 2 years later, in May of 1981, those tensions spilled over. Lefty, together with a man named Sonny Black Napolitano, took out the top members of the opposition faction. Donnie Brasco was then given a direct order: dispose of Anthony Bruno Indelicato. At this point, the FBI saw no choice but to end the operation. The circumstances became more extreme than ever, and Donnie was in real danger. However, by this point, the seed was already planted. While the Bonano family was falling into violent anarchy, Donnie successfully got Lefty and Sonny Black to agree to a new business venture: the purchase of a nightclub called Knight's Court in Holiday, Florida. The masterstroke? Knight's Court was renovated, during which time listening devices and cameras were secretly installed behind the walls. The bugs had been placed, and the FBI could now afford to pull the plug on Operation Sunapple. Pistone was relinquished from his deep cover in mid-1981. What was supposed to be just a few months turned into 6 years of undercover intelligence. From the nightclub in Florida, he was flown to Milwaukee, where he testified against Milwaukee crime boss Frank Balistrieri. The FBI could never have imagined the sheer success that the operation would bring. It opened a window into the inner workings of the Bonano family and the wider American mafia. Secrets came from New York mostly, but critical information was also gleaned out of Florida and Michigan. It took less than 24 hours for FBI officials to reveal to Lefty that Donnie had been a rat the entire time. Once the mafia knew they'd been played, they put out a bounty on Brasco's life for $500,000. Because of their disastrous infiltration, New York mafia families now instituted new rules. Before a member can join, they must take a life. And 2 family members, instead of just 1, must vouch with their own lives as collateral for the new member to be approved. After testifying in court and helping bring over 100 mobsters to justice, Pistone and his family were given secret identities and moved to an undisclosed location in New Jersey. They're just one of the many parties which now fall under the $10 million annual witness protection program. In 1986, Pistone retired as an FBI agent. These days, he works as a consultant for them and also gives lectures around the world, retelling his incredible story. Thanks to the evidence collected as a direct result of Joe Pistone's mission, over 200 indictments and over 100 convictions rained down on the mafia, crumbling the majority of their network. For that reason, we'd imagine that not a day goes by where Joe and his family don't fear for their lives. Nearly 40 years since his undercover mission, Joe Pistone, the former Donnie Brasco, still lives in the shadows, still with a price on his head. His courageous journey propelled him to hero status, and to this day, he remains one of the most influential law enforcement officers in history. Do you think that you'd make a good undercover agent? Why or why not? Let us know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.